Bizarre is the best way to sum up this movie. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Animation Station. I'm anything with the animation, and welcome to, unfortunately, another disappointment. I expected more out of this, but maybe that was my own fault. But unfortunately, this is another one of those Disney movies that's just not for me. Let's talk about Meet the Robinsons. This was probably one of my more disappointing first-time watches on this channel. I went into it excited, especially after having grown up seeing a bunch of the trailers on a bunch of other Disney movies that I have watched and I do own, like Pirates of the Caribbean and what was another one? There was another one that was on that I'm forgetting. Oh, Bedtime Stories. It was on that DVD too. Like, it was on a lot of DVDs, so I'm not entirely sure. I know it's been on more than those two, but those are the two I can remember. So, after all that, I finally saw this movie all these years later, and I gotta say, unfortunately, it's just not very good. It has a really good message behind it, and I love the ending. The ending is fantastic and has some pretty nice twists in there that I didn't expect. But unfortunately, you have to sit through a first half that's really slow, really dull, and really boring. Like, the first half of this movie is not good. It's confusing, it takes way too long to get to the actual plot, and it feels more like meaningless filler that somehow comes together to form a very loose and very strong, thrown together all willy-nilly kind of story. And because of that, the pacing's all over the place. The characters aren't very interesting outside of, the whole time gimmick. And a lot of the movie, it just feels like it's struggling to really get going most of the time. And that's a huge shame. But in the second half, it does pick up. It does get good. But unfortunately, because the first half is so dull and boring, I can't really say much about it outside of the fact that it left me disappointed. It's a very bizarre movie. I give it some credit for some of the really cool designs it threw in here. But unfortunately, it's just not for me. And I hate to say that, especially after having seen the trailers and a bunch of other movies from my childhood I watched regularly, and always being curious about this one. But now that I've finally seen it, I can kind of understand why no one talks about it, because it's not very good. And I hate to say that, but unfortunately, it's just how it is. But it does have decent 3D animation, even though there are some frames that are nightmare fuel. That uncanny valley. And it does have some bland dialogue, very boring writing. And the pacing is wildly all over the place. And then the characters are bland. The story, while having good intentions, is pretty generic. And the time travel stuff, while not nearly as infuriating as some other movies, I'm talking to you, Prisoner of Azkaban, it's still just not all that interesting, because this was made in what, 2003, 2006? When did this come out? 2007. This came out in 2007. We've already had a ton of time travel movies by then, so this was really nothing new. And it doesn't really do that much to differentiate itself either, and that's the really shameful part, because had it been a bit more differential from the usual time travel stuff, it could have been something really unique. And I do give them some credit for making another funny comedic villain with Bowler Hat Guy, but even then, he's not that funny. I remember Yzma and Kronk way more than I remember him. So, yeah, unfortunately, this movie's just not for me, and it's another time I'm left more disappointed than satisfied, and I hate to say that, because I'm trying to stay positive this month, but unfortunately, a good ending and a really nice quote from Walt Disney himself at the very end. It's not a spoiler, because it's just a quote they put that right before the end credits. It's not that much of a spoiler. Not to mention the movie's been out for over 10 years, so I mean, it's not a spoiler. But overall, if you like this movie, I can see why. It does have good ideas, it has an interesting art design, and it does have a really good message. And like I said, the second half of the movie is really good. But unfortunately, because the first half, in my opinion, sucked so bad, it just can't be recommended. And I'm sorry for fans of this one that were maybe thinking, this is one he'll love, this is one he'll give a 9 or an 8 out of 10. No, it's not a great movie. It's not even a good movie, in my opinion. And it's because the first half struggles so much to even get the freaking story going and spends way too much time with Thor crap. So, unfortunately, I have to give this movie a final verdict of a disappointing but brutally honest 4 out of 10. I do think Atlantis is worse, but not by a whole lot. This is sadly one of those movies that I'm kind of understanding of why it doesn't get talked about anymore, because it's not really all that interesting or unique. And that's a real shame, but you know how it is. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Unfortunately, this movie was just a complete miss for me. But like I said before, if you guys enjoy it, I can understand. It's just another one that doesn't really work for me personally. I will stick with Back to the Future, thank you. Well, that's it. See you next time for definitely a positive review, because we're looking at one of my childhood favorites. See you next time for Bolts.